The workshop always smelled like hot solder and machine oil, but that morning the scent was heavier, it twined with the sharpness of nerves. I made sure my display was neat. A small robot, the one I'd engineered out of scrap, sat perched on the table with hopeful, blinking LED eyes. It could grasp a pencil and clumsily, but with effort, it could sketch simple lines. Beside it, a stack of my sketches detailed a modular arm, my design for an affordable prosthesis, not beautiful yet but full of potential. 8 adults ringed me, their faces pinched or grinning with disbelief. Old folding chairs squeaked as the critique began, and Professor Garay's eyes lingered on my robot a moment longer than I liked. My heart shifted in my chest. I wished for silence, true silence, but I was surrounded by the disappointed shuffling of feet and the faint hum from the ancient air conditioner. "So Manuel," Garay started, lips flattening, "another automaton that crawls before it walks." The others tittered, and I kept my eyes on the scuffed tabletop, tracing a groove with my thumb. I started to explain the modular arm, the cost-saving, the way it could be printed or built from easy parts for kids in Tepito or Milpa Alta. Garay cut me off. "Let's suppose it works," he said. "Mexico doesn't need little toy robots. We need food, jobs, real work. How will this help your mother when her hands are full of laundry, not circuits?" Another teacher, Senora Idalia, pursed her lips. "My nephew makes more money selling snacks outside the stadium. That's honest work. Dreams are nice, Manu, but at some point, adulthood arrives." There was laughter, sharp as chalk on slate. Cousin Raphael in his paint-splattered shirt smirked and said, "Get a job in a taco stand, primo. Robots aren't going to change your life." Their words landed heavy, one after another. The only sound from me was the small whine of my robot's servos as it tried and failed to draw a straight line. My mother's gaze flickered over me in the corner. She offered anxious smiles, mostly for the others, but every so often she caught my eye as if to say, "I'm sorry you inherited my stubbornness." That made everything harder. Afterwards, I packed my machine in silence. The room emptied, people filing out with their opinions exchanged like coins in a tin cup. The robot's plastic hand trembled as I fit it into the canvas bag, or perhaps it was me. I slipped past the graffitied walls, down into the hot grey streets, and listened to the city swallow my footsteps. The house was suffocating that night. My little sister and I cleared the dishes, and the TV spat telenovela drama behind us, all heartbreak and shouted promises. My mother reached for my hand with her soapy fingers. "Maybe just try something simple next time, my Ray," she whispered. I didn't answer. My jaw hurt from clenching it. At dawn, I caught the first bus north to the tech district. The city glowed pink along the horizon, volcanic mountains looming faintly behind the towers. Along the cracked sidewalk, women swept dust into piles that never stayed, and I walked fast, clutching my messenger bag, the cheap plastic wheels of my project thumping against my thigh. I had an appointment with a startup, one run by kids who wore headphones and drank energy drinks all night. They saw my model, listened in silence and shrugged. "It's passionate, this thing you want," said one, "but coming from you. I don't think it's possible, you don't have the right background or," well, he trailed off, his gaze sliding away. I had grown up in the old barrios with their bad reputations, where the kids fiddled with bootleg phones and nobody expected them to code or build or get out. Rejections stacked up until it made a wall. Every time I heard no, it became mortar. Out in the world, a wall can cast a deep shadow. Inside it, I learned to live in silence. I fixed old appliances for neighbors, started again with second-hand parts, learning to scavenge as much from the city's cast-offs as from old textbooks. Once, at a swap meet, I found a robotic knee joint in a tangle of wires and broken phones. It set me back 2 weeks' wages, but by then I'd stopped counting the sacrifices. Some nights I sketched improvements under the dim light of a single bulb, paper gritty beneath my fingers. Cheap solder burned my nostrils. I burned through all my pride too, layer by layer, until what was left was something smaller but fiercer. The city never stops. It doesn't stand still for one stubborn kid or his machine. But in time, I learned its rhythms, when the parts markets closed, which university libraries stayed open the latest, which friend might house a desperate tinkerer for a while. I kept building. There were soft-spoken engineers one city over who didn't care about my accent or address, just my diagrams. In drowsy cafes, we spoke in half-code, trading parts and contacts. It was not acceptance, not yet, but it pushed me forward. Years unreeled like threads from a spool. I watched the city change, watched my designs become less theoretical, more real. The first time my prosthetic arm grasped a cup instead of dropping it, I almost wept. No applause, just the click of plastic, my breath clouding in the chilly dawn. I tested it with the old man down the street who'd lost his fingers in a bus crash. We laughed at how silly it looked before it worked, and I realized that this was the only audience that mattered. By the time I assembled my first production-ready limb, factories had started to whisper about automation. I did not return home, not yet. I slept in workshops, survived on stale bread and coffee, learned to endure the echo of all those old doubts. Each success was matched by failures no one cared about but me. Exploding batteries, glitched servos, a prototype that seized up at a conference and nearly set my sleeve on fire. Progress measured inch by inch, solder spark by solder spark. I partnered with new friends, engineers from Monterey, an American university student with a hacker's mind, a tech journalist who believed in underdogs. We formed a collective, registered a patent, and for the first time my name was on something official. One afternoon, 6 years after that first brutal critique, I watched my design lift a paintbrush in a crowded auditorium. Hundreds of eyes followed as the robot signed my name in broad strokes. The applause was a tidal wave, press requests arrived, awards, money, none of it mattered so much as the old man's shy words. "You've given me part of myself back." Still, I waited before returning. I watched the world from behind glass, the digital profiles, the TV spots that danced across screens in cafes and metro stations. But Mexico City is a living thing, and any victory is incomplete until you bring it home. When the time came, I packed my presentation in a battered suitcase and took the slow eastbound route to my childhood neighborhood. It had changed in small ways, street vendors now selling coconut water in biodegradable cups, murals brightening old walls, but the essence was the same, crowded, cheerful, stubborn. The market noise tangled with diesel fumes and the scent of frying dough stirring something urgent in my chest. My mother's door still stuck at the bottom, so I had to shoulder it open. Inside, the air was cool and close. Soaps, onions, old wood. My sister greeted me with screeching excitement, her kids swarming my legs, begging to see the robot Tia said you built. That afternoon, we gathered in my mother's living room, the place that once held disappointed sighs, now stuffed with neighbors and relatives. Even cousin Raphael lounged by the window, all grown up, paint on his fingernails. Professor Garay and Senora Idalia were there too, this time at my invitation. I'd sent formal notes. "Please join me for a demonstration of a new technology developed here in Mexico City." My device sat beneath a towel on the table, as simple as the robot I'd shown years before. My hands shook as I set it up. Some things never grow easy. The children murmured and even the adults couldn't keep quiet. Garay arched an eyebrow holding a glass of lukewarm cafe. I cleared my throat. "When I started building this, you all told me it was impossible." My voice sounded different, worn down and hard-edged. "That no one would use robots here, that it was childish to hope for more." Garay opened his mouth, but I pressed on. "But now this device helps people hold what their hands can't, a pencil, a cup, a guitar, built from local parts for our comunidad." I drew back the towel, the room fell into tense silence. On the table stood my prosthetic arm, shining with a utilitarian grace. I invited my old neighbor, Don Ernesto, who'd lost half his hand in an accident, to try it. I showed him how to nestle his arm inside the cuff, slipping intuitive sensors over his working muscles. "Don't be afraid," I whispered, fitting it in place. I guided his wrist gently, and he flexed the fingers, slow at first, then swifter. With every movement, the room seemed to lean closer, the air thick with expectation. I offered him a marker. He hesitated, then reached, and the prosthetic closed around it, steady, sure. He scrawled his name across a fresh sheet. It was crude but legible. Gasps rippled. The silence was enormous, filled with the breath between disbelief and realization. Tears slid down my mother's face. Raphael rubbed his eyes, staring hard as if trying to catch me faking it. Then once, just once, Don Ernesto lifted the cup of cafe waiting on the table and drank from it, no trembling, just quiet triumph. "What is this?" Raphael blurted, almost angry. I grinned, but it was shaky, raw. "Success, primo, for all of us." The room erupted, not into forced laughter, but genuine cheers, thunderous and overwhelming. Children crowded around, touching the robot hand. Priska, the quiet neighbor, asked if her boy could test it. Suddenly everyone had questions, all their skepticism swallowed by awe. There was still doubt in their eyes, but it had mixed with respect, recognition. Garay shook my hand. He did not apologize, but his fingers lingered and his eyes were softer. Later, as the adults discussed politics and costs, I slipped away and stood on the balcony, city lights unspooling across the valley. I saw myself reflected in the glass, older, maybe wiser, still the same. My mother found me out there, squeezed my hand. I always knew, she whispered brokenly, but sometimes it is hard to hope. I let the silence wash over us, heavy but warm. Below us, fireworks sparked above a wedding, lighting up the dark. I thought of every night spent with solder and broken dreams, of each small no that had built the walls inside me, and how every step back toward this crooked house had knocked a few bricks free. That night they toasted me with cinnamon-spiced chocolate and pan dulce, but it wasn't the recognition that mattered. It was the way my mother held my arm, the way children traced the robot fingers in wonder, the proof that hope, battered and stubborn, could make its own return. When the night grew thin, my mother set her hand atop mine at the kitchen table. "Will you stay a while this time?" she asked. I smiled. "Mama, this time I'm home."